So, like, Brian's answers cost 1 and 2, whereas James's tricks cost 0 and 1. So when you get to this crucial turn, it's very hard for Brian to be on the right end of things. It never feels like he gets to turn the corner in the matchup.
It's very hard to, that's for sure. He's going to start things off with a turn 1 island main phase brainstorm. Something we never see.
Huh.
That's pretty telling, I think.
So what I would wonder is if he's burying a Terminus 2 cards down. So you can't bury it 1 card down because it wasn't Tundra Brainstorm. It was Island Brainstorm.
It's an interesting play. James is going to play a Brainstorm as well here.
That play makes a lot more sense. But yeah, I'm interested in that. Boy, that's an interesting play by Brian. Okay.
That's a new one even to me.
I mean, so it's one of those situations where we're going to be like, oh, that's not good. But I respect Brian far too much to say that that's not good. There are corner cases where that's the right play, and we have to assume he's in one of them.
A little higher? What are you up to? I doubt you're attacking. Crop rotation, okay.
Yeah, and so for James, this is a good opportunity if he really needs that crop rotation to get something in specific to do while the shields are down.
I think that's going to resolve here because this, to me, it really feels like, okay, if you're crop rotating right now in the main phase, you want to go get an Inkmoth Nexus, but also it allows James to daze. Oh, that's kind of a beating. So I fully think that crop rotation was an attempt to get an Inkmoth Nexus if it resolves.
Okay.
But James has one in his hand.
I just had one in his hand.
So, like, by not playing a land yet, he plays crop rotation while Brian is tapped out to say, hey, I really need this to resolve because I need to get a good threat. Brian's like, all right, I'll force a will removing a blue card to stop your crop rotation. And James says, all right, I'll play my Inkmoth that I have in my hand. Nice force of will, your turn.
Now, to be fair, it is a 2 for 2. Because James did have to sack the land across his crop rotation. But the lands on James' side hardly count as cards.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The lands are expendable. You want to be force of willing much more important stuff in a matchup than crop rotation. That play may not look like much, but that's a very, very nice play there from James. BBD going to cast another Brainstorm here. He'll draw 3 cards, have to put 2 back.
So what it looks like, the reason for the turn 1 Brainstorm from Brian is that his only other land in hand was a fetch land. And if he's committed enough... Yeah. So you're responsible. Why would you play it turn 1 instead of simply just doing it on turn 2 and then cracking the fetch land? And I think if he thinks this is a low enough to the ground matchup and he kind of knows the deck he's playing against, he just needs to get that mana efficiency. He needs to get the Brainstorm out of hand right away.
There's a Verdant Catacombs off the top of the deck. I believe James knew that was there because of the Brainstorm, so he'll sacrifice that, go get a Tropical Island.
Okay, to start attacking. Brian was able to make Sensei's Divining Top, though. So it has a card that, I mean, the counterbalance top interaction is really powerful here. But maybe we'll see if Brian gets to untap. The deck does get to do this from time to time. Here's Invigorate on Inkmoth. It's 6/6, and it looks like it's gonna go crazy here, or Berserk if you would.
I say we rocking steady. Okay, here's Berserk.
Is there Force of Will in Brian's hand?
This game was played so good by James. It was played so good.
He got, and yeah, let's just point this out. Brian had the Force of Will.
Yeah, this game was played so good.
And James just baits it out on a crop rotation and then kills Brian with the combo.
Yeah, no,
James' hand was all pump spells, all in on the combo. He didn't have any protective counter magic. It's like, well, how am I going to get around this Force of Will? Well, I'll just get him to force something else.
This is never going to be a best of SCG Live moment. This is not going to be something that a lot of people remember. That game was played so well, and it lasted 3 turns.
You have to look at, you just have to, it's the kind of things where you have to look for those angle plays, and like, yeah, this may or may not work. I wonder if I can get him to counter this.
The ability to get Brian to counter that crop rotation because of the way he played it, which was in his main phase, he brainstorms first, then he plays crop rotation, which crop rotation, 1, serves as a way to search for income Nexus. 2, it's a shuffle for the Brainstorm. And you're playing it on your main phase while Brian's tapped out because you're scared of Spell Pierce and, other stuff like that when you have mana that you can actually pay. So you want to try to get a free counter spell out of his hand. So Brian obliges. He says, all right, I'm going to force will that because clearly this is important to you and you don't want to have this happen while I'm untapped. And James is like, okay, I didn't even care about that at all. Playing about that and then kill him the next turn. It was
excellent.
It's 3 turns and it's extremely well played.
Wow, all right.
James Rynkiewicz currently up a game here over Brian Braun-Duin.
How you win a counter war with only green cards?
Yes. Well, take a look at BBD's sideboard here. You'll find 2 copies of Wear and Tear, 3 Pyroblast, 2 Surgical Extraction, 2 Flusterstorm, an Aetherstorm Canoness, 2 Meddling Mages, and 3 Monastery Mentors. Brian is actually bringing some useful cards to the table here.
Yeah, so he does have some useful cards. He has these. So Monastery Mentor is not bad. It creates blockers here. It may be a preferred way for him to win. At the same time, he does have Flusterstorms that are great at dealing with pump spells and are good in counter wars on top of that. Meddling Mage is not unreasonable in this matchup as well.
No, I think the options here are actually pretty good for Brian. Meddling Mage being a rather good one. It's a clock. It has relevant text. You like a lot of what's going on there. What's James have in his sideboard?
James' sideboard, he has Corrosive Grip, Surgical Extraction, Flusterstorm, Piracy Charm, Submerge, Dismember, Sylvan Safekeeper, the extra Force of Will, Sylvan Library, Nature's Claim, and Pithing Needle. Sylvan Library is pretty decent in this matchup, as the games go more control-oriented, James can afford to pay a lot of life to draw extra cards and get a lot of free looks at cards. Corrosive Grip is not unreasonable if he's worried about sideboard hate cards or perhaps like a counterbalance. So that's going to be a pretty good weapon for him as well. I don't know if he goes so far as to bring in his own copies of Flusterstorm. We'll have to see whether that's his play.
He's going to do a little bit of resideboarding here. So as these players get ready here for game number 2, we will talk about SCG Game Night, the popular promotion. Thanks to you guys at home for playing in it. We're able to do cool stuff like every week in August. We'll be giving away the monkey along with the tokens and the pins. In September, we'll be doing the KRAKEN?
It's a KRAKEN, yeah.
It's a KRAKEN, okay. It's not a KRAKEN or a Dragon.
It's a KRAKEN.
It's perfect.
We've got a good KRAKEN token here.
And then, of course, as we unveiled a little bit earlier today in October, it is the HIPPO. Star City Games did cave into our demands. So now we do have a HIPPO with a bird and a cocktail glass on there. That'll be available in October, which will be here sooner than you think. Trust me. StarCityGames.com/game night for more information about that as we do get ready here for game number 2.
Yeah, this whole KRAKEN thing started because I had to, when we were going through it, I had to look up how to pronounce it because I was pretty sure it wasn't KRAKEN. And then, of course, it just spiraled out of control from there. And now we're just going to have to say that every time we talk about the token this weekend.
Correct.
Excellent.
Look, these
are the things we should look up when no one's watching.
Yeah, You brought this on yourself. If you would have never asked me, I could have never done this.
Yep.
But you asked.
Lesson learned.
That's right. Now we have to get that Minnesota accent out of you, which I know you try to hide during coverage, and now here we are.
Only select words.
I'm telling you, there will be one day where I just have you call a match entirely in your Minnesota accent. I'll make it a short one.
Only select words.
I'll make it a short one, but there will be a match. Like that 3-game match, that 3-turn game we just watched would have been perfect.
All right. So James Rynkiewicz goes for the turn 1 Pithing Needle, which is going to force Brian to crack a Scalding Tarn in response.
Yep, and I think we'll have a Sensei's Divine top name here.
I would think so.
Pretty predictable stuff there.
It's one of the better cards in Miracles. And outside of Fetch Lands, it's the only card that you can reasonably name. I like you get the extra value when you play a Pithing Needle into a Scalding Tarn, that you get to force them to crack the fetch land and then name Divining Top.
It feels good.
Yeah.
It feels good.
Remember, once they tell you what they've named, it's too late to do anything about it.
Correct.
So if I can't Needle, say Tarn, and then you're like, oh, in response, crack it. That doesn't work.
There's days on a counterbalance. James is making this look real easy so far. And it's not always this easy. There's a Ponder.
So if you Needle the top and then daze the counterbalance, that's one way to beat a countertop block.
Yeah, what does their deck even do now? See if Brian's got any sort of interaction. I guess he's not dead yet, and it's turn 2, so that's a bonus. James going to shuffle with Ponder. Does not like what he saw. He'll pass the turn back. BBD will take a draw step.
Remember, Rynkiewicz is behind a land there from the daze.
Yep. Here's a Brainstorm.
And James has done a good job of answering Brian's cards, though he still needs pro action on his own part. If we get into the game of who can brainstorm better, it's going to be Brian.
Yeah, Brian's Brainstorm not all that impressive there. Picked up 2 lands and then a copy of Sensei's Divining Top.
Well, good news is that one of them is a fetch land, and it gave him the ability to put a Terminus on top of his deck at some point.
So some small victories there.
Yeah, but without Divining Top, that Terminus on top of his deck is not as powerful, as he doesn't have full control over when it goes off. It's still a tool worth having. But in a lot of ways, he's sitting on a stack of lands.
There's a top. Pass the turn back. Now, Brian does have access to Wear Tear in his sideboard, so that's part of the reason that you're still going to see him play the top, because he does have ways to get Pithing Needle off the side, or excuse me, off the board.
Yeah, otherwise, if he did not, it says that will tell you that he has a way to get rid of it in his deck currently, because if he didn't, he'd hang on to the Divining Tops so that he could shuffle it away to Brainstorms.
This is Preordain. So Scry 2. Don't oftentimes see Preordain in Infect.
Yeah. Wear Tear, not totally unreasonable. It gets rid of Sylvan Library, it gets rid of Inkmoth Nexus.
Oh, there are plenty of targets. I'm not surprised to see that in at all.
At the same time, he also has Council's Judgment in the deck.
Yep.
So James continuing to cantrip here. Said he doesn't want to get into a cantrip fight with Brian. Inkmoth will do well to avoid that.
Yeah, he'd like to get into an Inkmoth Nexus fight, because that's a hard
better
card.
One.
That's a hard card for Miracles to beat. Brian going to sacrifice Scalding Tarn. Knows what his draw step is going to be because of the result of Brainstorm, so he'd rather fetch, get a clean draw step, get himself a copy of Volcanic Island. That'll turn on Wear Tear.
So 3 lands in play for Brian. We'll see what, he has done a good job of preserving his life total, making land drops. Those are great, but we'll see how he wants to press the advantage. He wasn't able to land the counterbalance. He has a second Sensei's Divining Top now in hand. That's not going to be very helpful. He would be looking for something like a Jace at some point, perhaps top decking an Entreat the Angels, or maybe a Monastery Mentor that he could be out of the sideboard.
Is it time for a Blighted Agent? It appears that it is.
Here's a danger. James is getting to develop his board. Now has 2 Infectors in play, an uncorrect fetch land in case he has some cantrips in the future. Remember, that Needle is still on Sensei's Divining Top, so Brian is not in full control of his draws just yet. We know that Brian at one point had a Terminus in hand. He may have brainstormed it to the top of his deck. If so, he'd be drawing it this turn.
Well, he did fetch on the previous turn, so
okay.
I think this is an instance where he just probably fetched that away.
And he's going to go for an end of turn where...
Yeah, it's an attempt of that on the Pithing Needle. James is going to sacrifice his fetch land pretty quickly.
For a forest, so presumably this still works.
I'm curious as to what this is.
Yeah. I expect him to get a blue mana at first. He's going to Nature's Claim the Sensei's Divining Top. And remember, he's doing this with the Pithing Needle still in play so that Brian cannot tap it to draw a card. Now, advantage is still going to go Brian because, as we know, he has another Sensei's Divining Top in hand. But another heads-up play by James.
Yeah. Terminus off the top. Okay. Bye-bye Blighted Agent.
Yeah, not the one he put there, but that'll do.
Yeah. And now it's top. And now Brian's starting to work his way back into this match.
This is the dangerous spot. Now we're in a top deck, like the cantrip board that James didn't want to fight. It's looking like he's fighting it, and Brian's not going to play fair. He's going to have the Sensei's Divining Top.
He's going to come in here with Inkmoth, maybe. He does have a Crossing Grip in hand.
Yeah.
He'll play a land.
And I think Public Enemy 1 just has to be Sensei's Divining Top. You can't let Brian start spinning the top with fetch lands in play. That's how this control deck wins the game. It just out top decks you.
Yeah, I think you just always have to keep that card off the table. No matter what it takes. And that's exactly what we saw James do.
And you see James really recognizing that priority. He could have gotten in some infect damage with Inkmoth Nexus and then played Blighted Agent, but instead devoted most of his turn just to removing Divining Top.
Inkmoth gonna get fired up. Here comes Rynkiewicz. Brian going to make a move here? Now, typically what you'll find against Infect, the best time to make a move is at the end of turn.
Yeah, is either at the end of their turn or your main phase.
Yeah. And Brian has actually talked about this quite a bit through his writing and through deck texts and different things. Is he oftentimes says the time you want to make a move against this deck is in a turn, so you don't get blown up by Invigorate, by Vines of the Vastwood, all of those ways they can interact with you. Now, part of the reason he's doing it in combat right now is because Snapcaster Mage is involved.
Yep, so Snapcaster, he has given Brainstorm flashback, and now the Snapcaster Mage will just block Blighted Agent. And a good extraction of value here from Brian.
Yeah.
They'll trade. He'll get a Brainstorm on end step.
He takes one hit of poison, but that's not the end of the world.
And there is one Invigorate in James's hand.
And even Brian on this turn too, because he did target Brainstorm. And he gets the flashback now too. And he's got the fetch land on the battlefield, so.
See that, and this is where, you know, the Snapcaster Mage, that is a 2-for-1 for Brian.
Yep.
A lot of sources of card advantage in the Miracles deck. The question, usually in the matchup, is whether or not he ever has enough control of the board to cash in on that card advantage. But right now, the answer is a tenuous yes. Like, yeah, he got his 2-for-1 there. It cost him a point of damage, a point of infect, and James still has the better board at the moment. So there are some issues to be worked through, but Brian did get the extra card.
Here's a Ponder. Brian on the Ponders build of Miracles this weekend. And it looks like a lot of people are really moving that direction.
Yeah, it does look like it's becoming the standard. Interesting top deck here. Ponder here from Brian. Pyroblast, Counterbalance, these are all great cards in the matchup. However, they aren't great cards on this board. So maybe they're good enough in conjunction with his hand that he wants to take them anyway. These are the cards he uses to win the game a lot of the time. To win a counter fight, to counter a cantrip, to get a counterbalance down is great. But if he's dead, that's not going to matter. And they're too good to pass up. He'll take them.
There's counterbalance. It's hard to pass that one up. Even if it is a naked counterbalance with no Sensei's Divining Top, it's still quite good.
James's deck is so focused around the mana cost 1. It's the easiest mana cost to blind flip in the format. Here's 2 poison.
Rynkiewicz will play a copy of Verdant Catacombs. Pass the turn back over to Braun-Duin.
Believe the draw there was the Pyroblast?
Yep. And Brainstorm the draw here for James.
Oh, it was the Wear Tear, actually. That's a better one to blind flip, to be fair.
Here is Brainstorm. Yep, there's the
Pyroblast. Didn't matter what order you put them in, they were all going to counter the Brainstorm.
Yep. Inkmoth is fired up. In we go.
And I like this. The Wear Tear, remember, the Inkmoth Nexus is an artifact creature. So if Brian chooses to, he can go after the Nexus here.
Yeah, I don't think James is moving.
Brian, at some point, I think he wants to make that play. As you said, he might just do it on end step. I could just do it here.
Like, I think this is fine if Brian moves, but James isn't going to move.
Yeah. Just too much open mana. So the Inkmoth Nexus gets weared. Brian goes to 4 poison.
Yep. Yeah, I'd be a little more. I'd be like a little more aggressive if I were James, if he had a top in play. But if there's no top at this point, and I know my opponent is potentially drawing a Pyroblast, I'm not too scared at this point to make a move. The Source of Plowshares is pretty good on the Glistener Elf. Now things get a little more interesting.
Well, what I like that from Brian here is he has the counterbalance in play. He cleared the board. Now that Pyroblast he drew is pretty live, as the Infect deck is slow to recover and it requires a lot of effort on the side of its cantrips. And so the Pyroblast is live again now.
Brian 3 poison and casting a Dig Through Time.
And this is his move to win the game right here. If this dig resolves, and I expect it to because of Pyroblast, things are grim for James. The Infect deck is very powerful when it's ahead or even on board, but once it gets behind on the board, the deck's top decks do not look strong.
No, not particularly. This is a deck that plays very well from ahead, and it keeps its opponent off balance and also kills him very quickly and also leaves him guessing. Here, Brian, I would say, I don't want to say he's in 100% firm control because he doesn't have Sensei's Divining Top yet, but he's in pretty good control of things right now. There's a top. Now he's in firm control.
Yeah, that should do it. And another Invigorate from Rynkiewicz. She's not going to go any further than that.
James knows that he's beat. He's going to concede right away. Braun-Duin going to win game number 2 here over James Rynkiewicz. Miracles, in fact, getting ready for a third one here. I still think things do favor Miracles, but you can see that Brian is pretty experienced in this matchup. Wouldn't surprise you too much, given that Tom Ross lives in Roanoke now. So maybe they play some pickup games of this.
Well, I mean, that was the thing. In fact, a year ago, when Tom Ross was really dominating the tour with it, Infect was kind of just the Tom Ross deck, and that's ceased to be the case. It's, you know, one of the things you can say about the format, it's the deck that's actually become a deck in the last 2 years, which is really impressive in an eternal format. But because of that, a lot of players are now experienced opponents against the deck. Things like you mentioned, you know, Brian knows to play his tricks on end step, isn't really caught off guard by any of the tricks anymore.
No, not anymore. I mean, he's experienced the matchup now. And that's really important because, you know, if you don't know what Infect's going to do, it'll catch you by surprise, that's for sure. So Brian going to push that Infect counter off the table. I don't need that right now. I'm perfectly fine as he gets ready here for game number 3. Very quickly, however, before game number 3 does begin, and again, James Rynkiewicz will be on the play, we'll talk about the Star City Games summer sale. We got a new sale every day at 11 a.m. taking place all August. Right now, that includes weekends too. Typically it doesn't, but for the summer sale it does. So right now, until tomorrow, save on select packs and booster boxes. You do see the image there. Some of those may be available. Head over to Star City Games and find out. And tomorrow, after round number 10 of coverage, we'll let you know what our other summer sale will be. But again, all month long, new sale every day.
All right, and we are into game 3 here, so James will be back on the play. And we saw before that, you know, I mean, once again, he's a Wasteland Daze deck, which can be very powerful, especially when it gets to be on the play. In game 1, if you missed it, it's a good one to highlight, especially how to make something out of nothing. James really, if you missed it, getting Brian to burn a Force of Will on a card that didn't matter when all James had was the combo with no protection.
That's my best of SCG moment right there. At game 1. It was a beautifully played game and it lasted all of 3 turns. I know it's crazy to think that a game could be played very well over the course of 3 turns, but that's exactly what that was.
Oh yeah.
That was Exhibit A right there. Here we go. Game number 3. It's a Verdant Catacombs. We'll head back BBD's way.
No turn 1 for Rynkiewicz. Either setting up for a turn 2 creature or a cantrip with a fetch open. But for Brian, there's the turn 1 top.
Yeah, this is a card that
he's got to daze it.
Yeah, it's so he has a daze in hand and he's electing not to.
All right. That is an aggressive line from Rynkiewicz.
Yep.
What that would say to me is that he's going for an early kill. So the cop will more than make up for itself in card advantage if this game goes to turn 7. Then it will have been wrong for James to not daze it. So yeah, I don't believe James thinks this game will make it to turn 7. Maybe not even turn 5. If he's not going to daze it.
Time for crop rotation, maybe? Yeah?
Brian not going to force it. No.
Not this time. Inkmoth Nexus, perhaps? Okay.
Yes.
And now sacrifice this land. Get that. A lot of deck and land manipulation there on turn 2.
Just getting ready for Become Immense.
Uh-huh. And now what?
Now Blight Agent. So that's the aggressive start I was talking about.
Fair enough. A wild turn, but he's got 2 Infectors on the battlefield and 4 cards in the graveyard working towards Become Immense. Also a Pendlehaven in hand, so a weird explosive turn there.
Yeah. Drop a Rynkiewicz. Does have the Krosan Grip.
Ooh, that's a huge draw.
Yeah.
Attack you.
Well, I wonder if he'll go for the pump or, you know, he's sacrificing a lot of damage by not Pendlehavening or Inkmothing here. Is it all just for the Krosan Grip, or is
Dude,
it just
I'm killing that top.
No, he's going for, all right, pump bladed agent.
All right.
He'll let Brian have another turn of spinning the top. Which he'll do.
Hey, that's why I'm in here and James is down there. This guy knows what he's doing. He's a Legacy Grand Prix champion.
Swords to Plowshares played by Brian, leaving up that mana so it can't be dazed. Now spinning top.
Yep. Brian will draw. Flooded Strand. Pass the turn back. Rynkiewicz will draw.
Our 3 turns gone. Brian just sitting behind a top. This is the game that Miracles wants to be playing. James has to put the game on his own pace.
Sylvan Safekeeper the draw. That's my eyes deceive me.
Yeah, Sylvan Safekeeper, that's one of in the sideboard.
I love it.
We're talking about invitational winning cards that see play in Legacy. There you have another one.
Yeah, we had Meddling Mage earlier. Now we have this.
Yeah, Ole Rod's invitational card.
Brian gonna spin that top. Terminus among the cards.
And this is interesting to me that how this game has played out, that James has not been more aggressive about getting rid of Divining Top.
Glistener Elf the draw.
And now Crossing Grip does take it down.
He's just doing he's pacing the game in a way we haven't really seen before. It's kind of interesting, actually.
Pacing it very slowly.
Yeah. Kind of saying, I'm not afraid to go toe-to-toe with you in this kind of longer game. Terminus is going to trade 1 for 1.
Yeah, I'm normally seeing fair players shy away from this.
Now it's time for Brainstorm, it appears. Maybe not. Nope.
Well, no real need to brainstorm yet on Brian's side, showing a lot of discipline and patience.
Yeah, James will cast Brainstorm, however.
And at one point, I'm wondering, will James offer up the Inkmoth Nexus?
Whew. I'm not convinced we're going to see that happen for a long time. I mean, now it feels a little safer.
Yeah, Sylvan Safekeeper.
Oh, we got a reader. Brian doesn't know
sure.
the old Sylvan Safekeeper. Come on, Brian.
It's 1/1 for 1. If you sack a land, a creature gets Shroud until end of turn.
It's Ollie Rod.
Yeah, only works on your creatures, so you can't. Not that good, but in this matchup, that won't matter.
How could someone so small cause so much trouble? BBD gonna sacrifice both of these Flooded Strands, get 2 lands out of his deck.
See a Flusterstorm at the front of his hand.
Curious what the next plan is here for Brian. The problem for James right now is he's got these daisies that are kind of stuck. And it's not like he has a lot of lands to work with as far as the Safekeeper is concerned.
Yeah, I don't think he can use his lands right now to protect anything. However, it does stop him from flooding out, which is a real danger for the deck.
Here's Ponder.
I'd be interested in James's situation if he'd be willing to get rid of the tropical island to save. Like, if Brian just swords the Safekeeper right now, just how James would protect it. All 3 of these lands are pretty valuable.
Here's Meddling Mage. We'll get confirmation on what this is naming in just a moment. It's an invitational card standoff.
Yeah. Well, as we know, Chris Procula, a much larger person than Ole Rod. That's why he gets to be a 2/2 to Ole's 1/1.
Meddling Mage is naming Invigorate right now, excuse me. Terminus, Brainstorm, and Flusterstorm are the cards in Brian Braun-Duin's hand.
That last part actually not entirely true. Yeah, Procula gets to be a much larger creature, but anyhow, all right. After seeing Brian's hand, this is enough for James to go for an attack.
Knows the coast is clear, or at least relatively clear. So going beatdowns. And a Pendlehaven activation.
And puts Brian to 4 poison.
Yep.
And kind of a It's just protect the queen strategy here for James. So Sylvan Safekeeper plus Pendelhaven plus Inkmoth Nexus. All right.
Yeah, it's a weird game state right now for James.
I mean, he's just, it feels like he's trying to lock Brian out in a certain sense. He's charming Brian to actually have an answer to that, which I'm not certain Brian does.
I'm not convinced he does. And we're going to find out as the turns play out. Here's a preordain.
Like, maybe at some point Brian has to try to terminus away the Safekeeper and then get a pinpoint removal spell. That's not easy.
Ooh, there's another Nexus.
That's really not easy now.
Pendelhaven activation, beatdowns. Huh. I've seen a lot of stuff in my days of doing coverage.
This is going to work.
I haven't seen this one. Safekeeper in combination with infect creatures and Pendelhaven.
Well, what I like about it is it's just so low investment right now. It's a 1-mana creature plus some lands. And so Brian's counterspells aren't any good here. Meddling, he had a Meddling Mage. That doesn't work against this either.
Yep.
He's actually just leaving Brian without an answer.
All right, so here's Brainstorm. So Brian can find an answer. That's not a Terminus.
At the very least, he could put a Terminus on top of his deck.
Brian found a copy of Wear Tear, but Safekeeper is an answer to that.
So he could Terminus in conjunction with Wear Tear. It would have to Terminus away his own Meddling Mage, so that's a win for James.
And James has an Inkmoth Nexus left behind.
Yeah, so he still would need another answer. It's not perfect by any stretch.
Brainstorm is done resolving.
Remember, the Inkmoth Nexus, we're in combat right now. Inkmoth Nexus threatening to put 6 poison onto Brian.
There's Wear Tear, the wear half of the card, of course, going after Inkmoth Nexus. Sack the Pendelhaven, which I thought James was gonna have to do, because the other 2 lands are too important.
Yeah, I mean, that's still a win for Brian. Getting rid of the Pendelhaven buys him a lot of turn.
Yep. All right. That weird turn is over. We can go back BBD's way.
Snapcaster Mage. Brian, that was the draw. That would be helpful. Has swords in his graveyard. That's as good as they will come.
Ponder with the draw here for Rynkiewicz.
But it's not.
Cast it.
The Snapcaster is not really card advantage here because the 2/1's not really a card on the board.
Yeah, it's pretty medium.
Question is, can these Inkmoths carry the day?
Yeah, what's weird about this is, like, James wants lands and I think specific cards, and you're not going to be able to get all of those. He's shuffling away with Ponder, so clearly he's looking for something specific. Mystery card coming. Truck Violence, not bad. 2nd blue mana. He's got 2 Dazes in hand. I'm not convinced he wants to attack in all of this open mana.
Well, he might, though, because his game plan this entire game has not been about, can I play around your cards? His game plan has been, your cards don't matter because of Sylvan Safekeeper. So if that's what he believes is the case, I think he'll continue to swing. Now, on Brian's side, he's hoping that James, I mean, he would love it if James were to attack, say, with a Safekeeper, which I don't think will happen. It's not a real source of damage. So if James is just on the plan of, I don't think Brian can answer Safekeeper plus Inkmoths, maybe he just keeps attacking here. You could just double activate some Inkmoth Nexuses and go to town. This turn would only be 1, but...
What to do? A delicate balance of things here for James. You can tell he wants to attack.
Yeah. Now remember, Sylvan Safekeeper, as being a card from Judgment, gives a creature Shroud, not Hexproof.
Yep.
Which means that James can't pump the creature if he decides to Safekeep it.
It's a big difference. Big difference.
If it was Hexproof, we'd see a lot more of that card in this deck.
Terminus. That's off the top. That's the draw set for Brian that turn.
It's a 2-for-1 for James, but the Safekeeper was doing a lot of important work there.
Ooh, Forcible is a nice draw.
Yeah, much better than the pair of Dazes James is sitting on. As the game gets late, we will see James draw more cards like Daze that are not efficient anymore.
He might try to go for the W here. He's got Vines of the Vespa in his hand. He has Force of Will and Daze as protection. Daze is not great protection. Force of Will, of course, is. So. Just going to take one, though.
Yeah, if he had another land so he could go Vines it maybe twice or something like that, he might go for it.
Brian going to play a Brainstorm.
All right. Finds another Snapcaster Mage, Counterbalance, and Volcanic Island. So the Snapcaster is very live. Swords to Plowshares, Wear Tear, Brainstorm, Pyroblast all appear to be in his graveyard. Counterbalance, not bad in the matchup, but it does, I mean, with staring on Inkmoth Nexuses, Counterbalance doesn't seem like it matters anymore.
I don't know, Counterbalance's ability to counter spells kind of, I mean, I know he doesn't have a top on the battlefield, but might be a little bit better than we are giving it credit for.
For James draws another Inkmoth Nexus.
Yep, he'll play the new one to activate this one.
These 1/1 Infect Flyers keep coming in. And you see some discipline on James' side. He could have activated 2 Inkmoths.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't think he's in that much of a rush. What's really interesting about this...
What's the danger?
Well, I mean, you could just run face first in Terminus and lose 2 of them.
That's true. If Brian has a Terminus
yeah.
on... Yeah.
I mean, like, you know, if Brian has some way to draw, like, Snapcaster Mage into Brainstorm, Flashback Brainstorm, run into Terminus, we have a fight over that. That's not really a fight you want to have.
Sure.
The danger here for James, even though it feels like he's in control of things right now, is if Brian miracles and Entreat the Angels...
None of this matters.
Yeah, we're going to have, like, kind of a battle over that all of a sudden, and then if Entreat resolves, then it changes how James has to play.
You know, James actually does have a fair amount of protection over that. He does have a couple Dazes, a Force of Will. And Daze actually not bad against, I mean, the presence of Daze in James's deck affects how much Brian can entreat for.
So here's a Snapcaster Mage. Gonna target, it looks like, where?
Said before, the end step is where he likes to go for kill spells against Infect. Now, James will Vines to protect it. The fact that there are 3 Inkmoth Nexus here makes this a slog for Brian, especially at 8 poison.
Yeah, this is interesting because you thought it's... How does he want to use Vines here? He's using it defensively to protect his 3rd Inkmoth Nexus. He could use it on offense to go for a kill, but it doesn't look like he needs to go that crazy right now. He's pretty comfortable with how the game is going.
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. If Brian's at 8, I don't think you ever want to kick Vines. You don't really need to anymore. And at the point you realize that this is only a 1 green spell, what better value are you going to get than protecting an Inkmoth Nexus? So you had the option to? Sure, why not spend it? I think that's all the card does anymore.
And Brian has certainly shown that he's not going to play into that card during combat.
Right.
You know, he'll play into it at the end of your turn or on his own turn. There's Flusterstorm.
Brian insists. And the Dazes will be no good against Flusterstorm. So no Vines, Inkmoth.
Not going to die yet because you can just daze the original spell. You can daze the Wear Tear.
So it lives.
Yeah, James is hell-bent on protecting those. Brian going to draw. A lot of back and forth between these 2 players this game. Here's Ponder.
8 poison for Brian, 3 Inkmoth Nexus for James.
I think a Swords of Plowshares may have been found in this Ponder.
That's what he needs.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a step in the right direction.
He needs a lot of them. And to a point, he doesn't have to tread water forever. His 2/1s just get free reign to attack. I mean, that's his win con, is Snapcaster Mages, which may become relevant.
At some point, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, we're not there. I don't think we're there until Brian has a 2nd one, and then then you start looking at it.
Yeah, then you've got a real clock.
Yeah.
Well, coming in. Rynkiewicz will draw. Invigorate, so now it, boy, it might be over now.
Because Brian's at 8, I think James can just free roll trying to invigorate this guy.
I think so too. This time we're going to see him fire up 2.
So
Previously, you've seen him only
yeah.
fire up 1, but he's presenting lethal now.
So Brian kills 1, James will invigorate the other one.
Make Brian have 2 removal spells and be able to beat Force of Will.
That's a lot of things you have to beat.
Yep.
And I don't know if Brian can do it.
Here's Snapcaster Mage to start.
Talked about the second one was very good.
Swords. Oh, he's got a Vines too. Geez, yeah, this game's probably over.
All right, so Vines protects it. It's going to have Shroud. Well, no, wait. That does mean if Brian swords the other one, James can't use the Invigorate because now it has Shroud.
Well, no. So there are 2 Ink Moths attacking.
Sure.
So if one Vines resolves.
Oh, was the Vines kicked? Oh, it was kicked?
No, it's just a regular Vines. None of that matters.
Sure.
It's just a Vines that says it's countering a Swords. So Invigorate's still live.
Oh, right. All right, Vines gives Hexproof,
Yeah.
not Shroud. So yes, Invigorate is still live. He's going to have to swords the Vines one in response.
Or he can Swords the other one. It doesn't matter.
Well, Vines doesn't give Hexproof per se, but close to, yeah. James can still Invigorate after Vines.
Correct. The issue here is that Brian has to have it all. And the person who actually has it all is James right now. He just has to make sure he sequences his things correctly.
And only 1 more card in hand, James can't, I don't know if James can lose on anymore unless that card is Flusterstorm.
Yeah, so they're going to get the stack set up.
Right. So if you're James, I think that's what you're thinking about is, can I play around Flusterstorm here? Because that's, if Brian spells just a single blue counter spell, or a Pyroblast or something like that, this doesn't matter. The Force of Will has it locked up for James. But if it's Flusterstorm, then the 1 blue on Brian's side could, in theory, counter everything. Could counter the Vines, an Invigorate, a Force of Will, all of it. So this is the right way to play it, because now if he Force of Wills the Swords, even if Brian has a Flusterstorm, then the Invigorate would win the game.
That's correct, and that's what's going to get the job done here for James Rynkiewicz, who's going to win this match here over Brian Braun-Duin, 2-1. Infect will take care of Miracles in what is typically a good matchup for Infect, and some very, very nice play there from Rynkiewicz to move on to 5-0. Both these players, Grand Prix champions, legacy format, but only one could win, and it was James with Infect.
Yeah, congratulations to James Rynkiewicz, up to 5-0 for Brian Braun-Duin. It's his first loss of the tournament, down to 4-1 with Miracles today.